I'm Alan Barr of Gallant Games, and this is our halfway point in our Tiny Cthulhu Yukon Dark actual play. And so Indigo, we've never tried it before, but it should be interesting. It might be us asking each other questions, or it might be the comments or whatever streaming service you're on, and we will field them as we can. If you have one for a specific person, just throw their name in front so we know who to turn it on to. But we're going to go from there. We'll give everybody a chance to introduce themselves. We're going to start with Ryan. Ryan, he's in that corner, I guess.
Hi. Yes.
We're going to kind of just do a clockwise thing around, ending with Ashley.
Hey, everybody. RPG stuff, writing, designing, playing, streaming, all of that. I play a lot of board games. I have a board game channel, Man vs. Meeple on YouTube, where we do live plays of board games, some small RPG content. Expect more RPG content in the future. So follow us at Man vs. Meeple, please. That would be awesome.
Hi, I'm Maddie Murdoch, and I, like Ryan, also write stuff for role-playing games, fiction, and world building, and supplement books, and all that stuff. You usually can find me online, MaddieMurdoch.com, and I'm also on Twitter.
I do lots of casting, streaming, editing, writing, and that sort of thing. I've been doing that for a while now, so you can find me on the interwebs. And also...
Cool. I'm Alan Barr. I don't write RPG stuff at all. I'm the odd one out here, I guess.
We were just having a conversation about how little you write.
I'm Alan. I run Gallant Games. I was the primary author on the rules for Tiny Cthulhu and the project manager, etc. So yeah, that's me. If you're here, you probably know who I am. I don't feel like I need to talk more, so we're gonna move it over to Ashley.
Hello. My name is Ashley. I am kind of the new kid on the block when it comes to all of my wonderful people that I get to play with on this. I have an actual play called Memory Alpha that uses the Tiny Frontiers Tiny D6 system. I have some other game podcasts. I have a Sliders podcast. So I like podcasts. I like to talk and let people listen to me sometimes. So that's my gaming experience.
Awesome. I'm starting a podcast that's not gaming related. So
what?
Really?
Not gaming related.
I'm more than a one-dimensional caricature of a game designer.
I just don't know how you have that connection. But that's
being on this here.
Is it about cooking?
It's not. It's about movies. It's we're watching a bunch of Criterion movies on the Criterion channel, and we're talking about them. So it's kind of classic. Those films that are on everybody's top 100 list.
Yeah.
We've never seen some of them.
Some of those Criterion choices are very strange.
There's some esoteric stuff in there, and I'm excited to dig in.
And like some of them, like
related. So.
Well, I have a Sliders podcast, which is pretty much Criterion, so they're top notch.
Sliders qualifies for Criterion.
So super good.
I'm pretty sure I've seen it on there, so that makes sense.
the whole complete series collection. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So Q&A. So let's start with some basic questions. I think first we're all here on Yukon Dark. So I want everybody to take a minute, and we'll do the same clockwise, and we'll skip me this time. But I want everybody to talk about their character and what appealed to you about the Yukon Dark idea and setting that Maddie presented. And then Maddie, when we get to you, I want you to talk about why you chose the Gold Rush Alaskan era, why Yukon Dark specifically, right? What made you pick that? So Ryan, give us a start. Tell us about Blue-Eyed Bailey.
Sure. So, I'll talk about both, because I want to talk about the setting first, because the setting of this game very much informed the decisions I made with the character. So, for when Marty told us the idea, I was like, yes, this is it. This idea, first of all, there's not a lot of games set in the Yukon and during the Gold Rush period. I've never played in a setting that is paired with this. Also, this kind of merger of the wilderness, gold mine plus Cthulhu is just a very good mesh that I am not familiar with that kind of merge. I don't know what you want to call it. I haven't seen it in games or movies, and I'm wondering why this is such an unexplored territory. So I think it was just a great idea. And I was like, yes, let's do it. It's already terrifying to be out there. Let's make it even more terrifying with all the Cthulhu stuff. So of course, I knew enough about the Yukon, but I wanted to do more and more. And I started reading about people that existed back then that came to these towns and just their motivations for why. And one of the, and I can't remember his name now. I should have looked it up. But there was a really famous con man that kind of made his fortune going from mining town to mining town, basically conning everybody and then moving on to the next mining town. And like I thought that was really interesting, and also the kind of character that I think would be great in a Cthulhu game. But I didn't want him to be like terrible. I wanted him to be more like, this is what he does because this is what he knows how to do. He doesn't really want to like swindle and hurt everyone, but like this is what he's good at, and so he does it, right? And he doesn't like move from town to town bleeding them dry, but he does run the occasional con now and then.
We'll go to Monty, I guess.
Okay, sure.
I'm inverted, so it's taking me.
Yeah.
Got it. So obviously I'm the GM, so I'm a character, but Ellen asked me to talk about why I chose the setting that I did. The first reason why I chose this setting is actually because my favorite Lovecraft story is called The Curse of Yig, which was co-authored by Lovecraft and Zelia Banks, who is also a very famous 1920s pulp fiction writer. She wrote a lot of really cool horror and sci-fi. And the reason that that one is my favorite is because it follows the story of a family on the frontier in the plains, 1800s, right? And they're so isolated from all of their neighbors that it ramps up all of the, I guess, like the terror that happens, because it's like you're in the middle of nowhere, your neighbors are, you know, several miles away, and it's just you and your family. What are you going to do? So I was kind of experimenting with what I thought would be interesting scenarios on the frontier. And I was talking about these with my husband, and I was like, well, the prairie sounds interesting, and that's kind of where the Curse of Yig takes place. But I was like, oh, but it's not really all that riveting as far as like a frontier setting goes. And so my husband actually gave me the idea, well, what about like up north? What about the Klondike? And I was like, oh my gosh, that sounds fantastic. And so I really have to give the credit to my husband for coming up with that idea. But definitely as I took that kind of that seed, that story seed of setting it up north, I really got interested in just kind of what cosmic horror themes exist in Arctic horror and on the frontier and that type of thing. And that really pointed me in the direction of that Jack London story, To Build a Fire. And there's a really cool quote from that story. I'm not going to read the quote, but I'm going to paraphrase it. Basically, where it's talking about how this man goes out in the woods and he thinks he's going in the right direction, but he's totally not. He gets completely lost. He tries to build a fire and ultimately ends up freezing to death. But the cosmic horror element of that is that there is a dog with him, and the dog is worried about the cold that's coming from the sky. Because the dog has, you know, like these 100 or thousands of years of kind of like instinctual knowledge, where he knows, like, you don't go out when it's snowing, you don't travel alone, you don't do all these things that this human is doing. And so as soon as the man dies, spoiler alert for the story, the dog just is like, okay, well, you're dead, I'm gonna go home now. And so he like goes in the right direction and goes to the town where he, you know, knows he's gonna be safe. And so I really loved that concept of like, what if there was something horrible that everyone else knows about, but you don't. And so that's really where I came up with this story where, you know, there's just, you're in a scenario where you think you're in control, you think you know everything, but there's just something out there in the sky that you're not quite sure of. So that's really where this setting kind of came from.
That is super cool, because you just I don't know, there's so many touchstones in that too, like The Thing.
Yeah.
Or
Yeah.
you know, I just think of Nordic noir, and I read In Cold Blood at way too young of an age. So there was something about what you said there, you know, the isolation of being there and what, you know, what can happen when you're all alone and you have nobody to help. I think what resonated for me a lot with the scenario that you set up was that I love Nordic noirs. So I like that kind of bleakness and the just where it's almost gothic in a way, where you get the setting and the environment is just so much of a character in the story, sort of, whether it's bleak or that sort of thing. And I have a not so secret love for Westerns. So the chance to play, in the 1890s on the frontier in the Klondike and a Gold Rush just tickled me. So that was super exciting. I think as far as a character, I approach every character kind of differently. And sometimes I look at, class or role or that sort of thing in conjunction with other character elements. And for some reason, when you talked about this, I just immediately thought I wanted to play. So rather than even talk about the role that I wanted to play, I thought about like wanting to play a fur trapper, and kind of, this is going to sound really weird, but like a mashup between sort of a Deadwood Calamity Jane with Deke of Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. So it's that kind of gruff, frontiers woman, combined with somebody who's experiencing things for the first time in sort of a wide-eyed way, So that's kind of how I approached building my mystic. And then I just ended up playing a mystic. Quite sure what and forgive me, Alan, I'm not remembering what they're called. They're books. They're
the spell or the sorcerer.
Yeah, no, like mystic.
So mystic is the archetype, and then the magic is the sorcerer trait.
Yeah. So when I was trying to wrap and Madi knows this because I reached out to her at a point, and I was trying to wrap my brain around what that looked like for this character I had kind of envisioned. And then I kind of hit on it. So, there's lots of cool traits that you can take as a mystic. And one of them you automatically take as mystic. But I also looked at familiar and like what Alan was saying, sorcerer. So just kind of building it that way, where I kind of came up with a concept in who I thought this person was and how they engaged or interacted with the environment, and then kind of built it from there.
Before we cycle away from Gina, though, Paul has a question about the character of Katie and Edgar. So let's get that here.
Oh, cool.
So Paul asks, for the character of Katie, her companion Edgar has played a steady role when control of said character was taken away for a period of time. Any inspirations or story on how Edgar came to be? Were other animals considered as a form for Edgar?
Absolutely. Because I thought about wolf, but wolf seemed too much like we had a musher with some cool dogs, and I didn't really want to go that way. And I thought there's a lot of different sort of animals that I could pull from. And then, go down those rabbit holes of Google searching and Wikipedia and what kind of animals are in the Klondike and the Yukon. And birds are pretty freaking cool. And one of, crows, there are crows up there. But then when I saw that there's a northern raven, it just kind of spoke to me. And, Poe would have been, Edgar Allan Poe would have been probably about 30 years prior, I'm thinking, the peak. So definitely there would have been some familiarity with Edgar Allan Poe. So then I just thought, she has to have a raven named Edgar, because part of her background that doesn't necessarily, some of the stuff comes through and some of it doesn't, but her mom was a theater person. Mm-hmm. So I figured that's where she's got her kind of random literary knowledge. So that's what inspired me to go with raven. And ravens are cool birds. And there's that whole Viking thing with ravens too. The ravens are cool.
All right, we'll swing to Ashley.
Okay. So I live in Arizona, and so we have a lot of mining towns and things like that. So when it was brought up that it would be a Cthulhu setting in like a mining town, that was incredible to me. I'm like, that's such a good idea, because like Ryan, I've never really heard of anyone do that before. But it's awesome because they always have the ghost tours and things like that. So it's always kind of a spooky vibe anyway. So to bring in cosmic horror to it, I thought was genius. So awesome, Madi. And I'm enjoying it. It's so much fun. When I was coming up with my character, I was thinking about, okay, frontierswoman and things like that. And so I did a lot of just Google searches, like Katie mentioned, just, looking for inspiration and things like that. And one thing that came to mind is this is going to date me a little bit, but I was in junior high when Titanic came out. And so it's not so much around the same time frame, just a long time ago, but Molly McGee, I remember Molly Brown. The Unsinkable Molly Brown was one that I really remembered and really kind of stuck with me. So I wanted to kind of base my character off of her. I was like, because she was someone who did not grow up with money. She kind of came from a rougher background. She was married. Her husband died. She had all this money and was like, I am not rich folk. I don't know what to do with this. And so that's kind of the angle I wanted to take with Molly. And in my Googling, there was someone with the last name McGee that was pretty well known during the gold rush and all of that. So I'm like, Molly McGee sounds good. And then we came across Katie McGraw, so McGraw and McGee, which is too close probably than it should have been, closer than it should have been. But yeah, so that's kind of my inspiration for her, and how I play her is very much like she's tough, and she was married off at kind of a young age because farmers and stuff. And so she has all her husband's money. He died. Her husband died. And now she has his money, and she's kind of getting to do what she wants to do for the first time. So she's kind of clinging to life, which is why a lot of her decisions involve making sure she stays alive rather than necessarily helping other people. So yeah, she's been fun to get into because she's very not like me. She's very not like me. I'm not like this at all. Yeah. So it's been a lot of fun. I've enjoyed it.
Awesome. I'll give a little bit. Jameson was chosen for me because, one, I like dogs, having a few myself, and so dogs aren't the thing you get to do a lot. So and two, I tried to pick a character who was quiet so I could run the stream in the background and answer questions and type as I needed, and I wouldn't have to stress if I seemed like I wasn't involved for a minute. So that was that. Although I did get a question about Jameson. So Paul asked, in an earlier episode, Jameson talks to Delilah about Egypt. Was that a spur-of-the-moment PC history moment, or was that established in the character's backstory? So, all right. When I GM, I don't like character backstory. And so that translates as a player to I tend to not write it. I tend to give somebody a couple bullet points and go, this is kind of who I am. We'll figure it out as we go. Mm-hmm. Backstory is passive. What happens at the table is active, and that's more interesting. And so I decided at the spur of the moment that Jameson had worked in Egypt for an archaeological dig. And so I said that. And there we are. And he also apparently has been married in the past, and his wife has passed away. That came out of nowhere, too. So both of Jameson's backstory has just happened as we're playing, and I say stuff.
I think that's the best way to do it. You got to leave those blanks because you don't know what's going to happen in the story. Then all of a sudden you could be like, ooh, this would be really interesting if this was like a traumatic moment because of X reasons, right? Like knowing that Jameson had a lost love and knowing that Molly had a lost love, like those things could play. Well, maybe love. I don't know. She was married at a young age.
Mm-hmm. She was married. Yeah.
But those things could come back to haunt people, so to speak.
Mm-hmm. Or literally, depending on what has to do with it.
I like that it's very in keeping with the character that you're playing also, Alan, because he is not a chit-chatter, and he is not going to be sitting in the saloon and talking about his adventures and relationships and stuff like that. So it would make total sense for him to drop these little, nuggets of gold. So, and we'd all be like, what? Jameson's married? I had no idea. I've known you for 3 years.
I grew up in North Dakota. And so I grew up in a very agricultural, rural community where it's a trope, but it was also true. A lot of the men who I grew up with were exactly what you would expect out of a Western, right? They were quiet. They didn't talk about things like feelings or how work or their past, right? It was just you worked, you did it as little as possible, and you got done and you went home. And so I am definitely bringing a little bit of that modern frontier vibe I grew up with to Jameson, I think, as I play him. And I'm a big fan of Nordic Noirs, actually, Gina. A Town Called Malice made my top 10 RPG list because it was a Nordic Noir theme, and nobody does that, and it's fantastic. And I wrote my own called Snowfall.
You did.
I remember that, yeah.
It's a lot of fun. But so I'm a big fan of the genre, and this is a nice blend of Westerns, which I love, and Nordic Noir, which I love, into this new genre. I grew up reading Jack London. We had all the Jack London books on my shelf at home when I was a kid. So this worked out. Madi proposed it, and I was like, well, this is 100% a dream to my wife, and I didn't know it till right now, but now that I know it, I can't not have it. So here we are. There's a question for you, Madi, so here we go. It's from Greg. Greg says, as a GM, what is Madi's favorite character moment?
So far, I really loved that scene where they go to Molly's room in the hotel and they're trying to decide, like, what do we do next? And Jameson's like, I know, we have this severed finger. Let's put it in a bowl and let's have Katie do something with it. And I absolutely loved that moment where, like, Gina decided, like, I'm going to do this weird spell thing that I've never tried before. And then she, like, fails her corruption test. And she's like, you know what? I'm going to have Katie go crazy. Like, I'm just going to have her have some type of episode, because that would be so in keeping with Katie's journey as some type of mystic, magic user. She doesn't know what she's doing. Suddenly she has this horrible experience where she's seeing through a dead person's eyes. And yeah, that's absolutely going to wipe her out. And so I loved that one. In particular, I thought that was such a cool move. And even though I felt bad that Gina, like, for the next couple sessions had to kind of like sit out and had Edgar play for her, I felt really bad. But I thought, as far as a story moment goes, it was brilliant. It was really cool.
I was so cool with that because, first of all, there was a lot of interplay that went into that. Like you said, Jameson's just like, do your thing, and then she's like, thing. Are you even talking about, wait, Jameson thinks I have a thing. But you did, Madi, such a great job of talking about, like, what happened and what that looked like, that I was like, yeah, there's no way. She just goes, she has inured for a trait, which in the Tiny Cthulhu is, you kind of have seen it all. You've seen a lot of weird stuff. And I figured, with having a Raven familiar since she was probably like 3, she, is a little tougher, but I was like, yeah, nah, not after what Madi was talking about. I was like, she is not going to shrug that off.
So, we're going to get to, Paul asked a question I want to get to before it, like, vanishes on my chat log, so I can show it before I forget it. Paul asked, will this one day be a Tiny Cthulhu adventure book, PDF, print-on-demand thingamabob? The answer is hopefully, but I'm not going to promise it publicly live to you until I know it's going to happen. But I would love to get everybody here to contribute to something that sort of canonized what we've gone through here, because I think, first of all, it's a really cool setting that Cthulhu stuff doesn't explore. Secondly, everybody here is fantastic, and I think the words they would put on paper would blow me out of the water, and I want to see that happen. So we'll stay tuned. Hopefully news soon. Except Ryan. Ryan would be fine. Whatever. I think Ryan writing publishing would be fine. I say that because I dearly love working with Ryan.
We've worked together quite a bit, actually, over the years.
We have. So you were on my first project ever. So
I was. I knew you before there was even a Gallant Night Games.
Did you?
Yeah, I remember when you made a little Facebook group and you changed the name of it to Gallant Night Games, and you said, "This is a thing now." Because you had
that was because of the fan group.
Well, yeah, but I don't think there was a fan group back then, was there?
When I co-opted it.
But back as like
our first project was ran as Gallant Night Games. We had a game company.
Oh, I thought that your first project was running something else, and then you changed it.
We've only had one Kickstarter account the whole time. It's always been Gallant Night Games.
That was
we changed our logo at one point.
Maybe that's all I'm thinking of.
We have an old logo. Maybe I'll bring it back for our 10-year anniversary and another 6 years. Oh
Yeah, I
my
was
god.
gonna say, that's a long ways away.
It's real long, but it's also not. Like we just had our 5-year anniversary of our first Kickstarter project this year. So
Nice.
time is weird.
Congratulations.
Time is very weird. Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah, it
it's a
is.
flat circle.
Yeah, right. So the Believer 74 had a question. Jameson seems like a straightforward, practical person. My question about him is, would he die to save his dogs? Absolutely. I don't think real Alan could separate from Jameson for that moment in roleplay. I would do it in real life. I would do it in game. I was watching as I was going to bed last night. I was watching The Flying Guillotine, which is an old Shaw Brothers movie from China, Hong Kong. And there's a part where they demonstrate the flying guillotine on a dog, and I had to like turn it off and walk away. I was like, no, I'm out. I can't watch the first John Wick movie anymore. Like I have to like start.
Yeah.
Like I got to start right here. This is where it's okay to start.
Yeah.
So yeah, no, I don't think I can separate those two things.
And we made that a campaign rule that the dogs wouldn't get hurt at all.
Yeah, nothing terrible. No terrible,
nothing
horrible
terrible.
things for dogs.
Yep.
Yeah, that was one of our campaign rules. They can be threatened, but they can't be actually harmed.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
All right, so we have a question for Ryan.
Uh-oh.
So for Blue-Eyed Bailey, you mentioned that he sees towns as opportunities, but there seems a limit to how far the con will go. With Queasy, Duff, and the miners, is Bailey protective of these folks because they're friends or because they're his, quote, marks, and he doesn't want Barton leaving them ruined, destitute, or perhaps another reason?
I think, honestly, they're friends. I mean, those aren't the kind of people that Bailey would con. For one thing, miners don't have a lot. They came here with nothing. Those are the kind of people that he could drink with. At best, he might con them out of a drink in exchange for, like, telling a story or something. You know what I mean? Like, Bailey's the guy that might show up when somebody's getting a drink and be like, hey, one for me? Like, that kind of thing. But it would be more like the rich people that he would, like, the hotel owners to get free stays at the hotel if he needs a place to stay, or free food if he needs a meal, or, maybe the bartender every now and then to get a free beer. But mostly, like, I think it's just the richer you are and the more you remind Bailey of his parents, the more likely he's going to be to try to, like, con something out of you. And he's definitely in it for the long con too. Like, he's fine with slowly taking someone's money over years and years, investing it in whatever real estate or whatever he's supposedly investing it in until one day he'll vanish. I don't know if the attachments that he makes here will eventually stop him from vanishing, but they might not. One day he just might be gone with whatever he's made this whole time. I hope that was a good enough answer. I don't want him to be like a heartless person. But also miners, yeah, it's hard to con a miner. Like, I don't want their boots. I got no use for their boots. I don't know what else they can give me.
Right. Oh, looks like we lost Katie and we have a new Katie. Hang on.
Oh,
Yeah.
wow. We got two Katies.
And we
Now we lost one.
Oh,
We're losing people left and right.
wow.
Weird. Musical chairs. So I mean, we're halfway through. We actually haven't had a lot of corruption loss, all things said and done. We've had some terrible situations, but for the most part, they've remained in the realm of the quote unquote ordinary, I would say. So, Madi, as a GM, when you're looking at this campaign as a whole, do you have like a bell curve for corruption loss or a scale? Like, what's your expectation for that?
Generally, I like to keep all of the actual like mythos stuff and like horror kind of tame at the beginning, because I want people to not go crazy and murder each other too soon. I do love the kind of slow burn of like not knowing what's happening, but being so curious that you're willing to slowly risk your life because you're like, I'm just 1 hour away from knowing this, right? Like I'm just one step or one clue away from knowing the truth, and I just have to keep going, right? And then by the time you actually look at the horror behind the curtain or whatever, it's too late, right? And so I definitely love playing horror games that kind of have like a slow burn at the end, and then suddenly it's like 0 to 60. You're like, oh no, I'm in the thick of it. I can't get myself out. I have no other options. I'm gonna start doing horrible things to myself and other people to get myself out of here. So I definitely planned the story to have a lot more just like human interactions in the first half, and then definitely, as the cliffhanger from last week will show, right, we're starting to finally get to the point where the supernatural stuff is going to start occurring, and you are all going to have to start making decisions about, well, how much further am I willing to go? Hopefully all the way, right? Like, hopefully you all won't just be like, bye, and then like run away. But we'll see how it goes.
I mean, I've got a primed sled ready to go. So
yep. Perfect getaway.
So Paul asked a question, and I think obviously he's joking. So I think we'll each give an answer that we think is funny here. What Boomtown person has the job of moose bit cleanup or have wildlife taking care of that? By the way, that was one of the more visually visceral scenes among many in this campaign thus far. So, Ryan, who do you think has the job of moose bit cleanup in the town?
The Moose Patrol.
That makes sense.
I mean, who else would do it?
Clearly.
They patrol for moose and they clean up after them.
I think that's a good answer. No, I mean, no one except you four know that the moose thing even happened. So, I mean, it's not like people are going to go out there and clean it up. So probably wolves or something.
That makes sense.
I think the flying man uses it as target practice. So like whatever's flying, he can like swoop down and try and like see which moose bits he can pick up as he's flying through the trees. So I think it's probably like, an obstacle course for the flying man.
Gina?
Yeah, I think critters probably. And total side note, because you brought up the flying men, Katie's new thing is like, maybe flying men aren't bad. Maybe they're like a good part of this thing.
They're a necessary part of the biome. That's
maybe they're angels and they're there fighting to help. Because she's like, they're just watching over.
Even though you saw them trying to like pull the guy up
and then drop him to his death.
Yep.
Yeah, that's right. The guy did maybe he was just being rude. I don't know.
Yeah, he deserved it.
That's a good point.
Yeah. He probably did something bad.
We don't know.
Right.
I saw that awesome pun.
Oh, I didn't see it. What was it? I missed a pun.
Musketeers.
Yes,
thank you. And thank you for bringing it back up for me. Were-mooses.
I really thought it was were-mooses.
Yeah, I was prepared for that too, frankly. Antlers to become tentacles or something.
Right.
I would prep for something truly horrible there.
I do think you don't have. Is there a Gallant Night Games t-shirt place or?
We have one. It's actually in the middle of being revamped and refurbished.
Cool. Because I totally did think like when somebody said about the werewolves and the we eat not normal for breakfast.
Yeah,
I was like, that's a t-shirt.
Yes,
that's a Yukon Dark t-shirt.
Mm-hmm. I should look into that.
Yeah,
I'll look into it. Maybe Patreons will get a t-shirt.
Or we could do like a jersey style one and have like our character on it and it can say Yukon Dark on it. That'd be fun too.
Cute.
For like our
that sounds expensive is what I heard.
Yeah.
Yeah. Red bubble.
This sounds great, Alan. You should pay for this.
Yes,
no, I didn't say you should pay for
it.
it. I said it would be a cool idea. I would pay for my own.
Me too.
That'd
be awesome.
Your own.
I would.
Anybody who knows me knows I wouldn't make you pay for it.
Yeah, it's true.
Yeah.
So, I guess we're about half an hour into the Q&A. We've had some great questions, folks. Thanks. Feel free to ask more. Here at PBS, we need your support to keep the lights on. So that's what I feel like right here, right now.
We're doing a variety show.
I'm gonna open the floor to the rest of the cast. I've been kind of directing the questioning, but if you have any questions you want to ask somebody in the cast or somebody, feel free to go ahead.
So many questions.
Go for it then.
Actually, I do have a question for you, Mari, because I feel like we have made, as a group, a lot of decisions that were probably not the direction that you intended the story to go. From where we are now, I'm just curious, how close are we to where you originally thought we would be at this point?
And as a group, he means Jameson kept shooting people. As a group.
That's certainly part of it, but we've also just done some weird stuff.
Two people.
Okay, so there are two kind of main deviations from what I intended, and those happened in the most recent episodes. So the first one was when you all / Jameson decided that Curtis needed to die. I was not expecting that to happen. I had prepared for if it did happen, but I didn't think it actually would. And so for that evening, I was preparing some other stuff and clues that like Curtis would give you. And that didn't work out. So that was the first one. The second one was the decision that you all made to not put Bailey in jail and actually do like a miners' riot against Barden instead. I thought that was a really cool move. So I kept trying to say like, well, you guys should probably put Bailey in the jail for his own good, right? And you guys were like, no, that's a stupid idea. And I was like, yeah, it's a stupid idea, but you should do it anyway. And you guys were like, no, we're not doing that. We're doing something else. And so I thought that was a really cool moment, but it definitely required me to pull some strings. And so what happened was I actually pulled in that spell book with the gold, like turning the rocks into gold, like way sooner than I originally intended.
So
but those are really the only two changes. Yeah, for sure. So I felt like that was a really cool moment for you all, and it really kind of got me a little bit stressed, but I was able to kind of pull in a really cool, I guess, like story beat in earlier. So I thought it turned out great anyway.
I'm just happy that they didn't that the rest of the party didn't decide to throw Bailey in jail. Like,
I just want to point out, Madi, you played with me before in many games. I don't know why you're surprised when this stuff happens, because it happened when we played D&D together. I got into a full like WWE fight with like an innkeeper at one point.
Yep.
Where I just refused the whole combat to draw a weapon. I was like, I'm gonna throw him through the wall. It's gonna happen. I can't.
That's fine.
I just assumed I made Curtis scary enough that you wouldn't try to do that, but no.
I kind of wondered if I was like, as we were doing that, I was like, I wonder how much this is going to throw off the whole plan. But the good thing is with Cthulhu, you can always bring someone back and be like, guess what? They had magic powers this whole time that you didn't know about. Like, whether Curtis is a zombie or not, I don't know. Maybe he's a zombie now.
I think a story that illustrates this is the first real RPG campaign I ever played was in college with my freshman roommate Tom as the DM, and I was like, I'm gonna play a rogue. I've never played D&D before. I'm gonna play rogue.
I feel like I saw pictures of this campaign recently.
I did. I saw some pictures recently. And at level 2, he had us go to this place or whatever, and I was like, oh, there's some shiny rocks here. I'm a rogue. I'm going to steal them. And I did. And he was like, now that you've stolen them, you've broken the seal that protects the world from the elder gods. And my response was, well, I'm level 2. Screw it. I'm going to go get rich for a couple of years and live nice and then die. And he had to, I derailed this whole game. And he had to make, an NPC party of adventurers to go fixing. Because I was like, I'm living the high life. I doubled down on making bad choices. And he didn't know what to do. So that's kind of my defining archetype as a player. I just doubled down on bad choices. Fair warning, if we ever play more stuff, that's going to happen a lot.
This is super random, so just say if you want me to ask a different question. But now I am really curious if any of the other cast remember the first character they played. You played a rogue.
Of all of ever? I 100% remember my first character ever.
I think everyone remembers their first character.
That wasn't my first character. That was my first real campaign.
That's a different thing. But I remember the first role-playing character I ever played in an actual game for sure. It was a bounty hunter in the Weston Games D6 Star Wars.
Nice.
Wow.
I'm about to start a game of that on Sunday.
That is so cool. Times 2.
Yeah, he was awesome. But we were young. We were young because I don't know how old we were when that game came out, but definitely like 6th grade maybe, playing this game where we only like barely had an understanding of the rules. So like our team was like we had like a bounty hunter and like a Han Solo kind of character that my friend played, and then another bounty hunter that was a robot, and we were like going toe to toe with like Jedi and Sith and like black, and it was like
That's awesome.
the rule. I mean, that rules don't support that, but we didn't. I mean, whatever. We're in 6th grade. Like we were just having fun with it, right? Like,
That's cool.
so yeah, it was a fun character.
Monty, do you remember the first character you played?
Yeah,
Made.
the first one was one of those really, really bland, like half-elf rangers for 3.5. I'd never played a role-playing game before. I was a freshman in college, and my friends were like, "Hey, want to try this thing?" And I was like, "Okay, I like Lord of the Rings, so I'll just do Legolas as a character, basically." So it was really, I mean, I had my friends that were really into it. They made some awesome characters, and I was just like, here's my half-elf ranger. I'm pretty fun, you know. Yeah. But definitely since then I've learned a lot about what you can do with the game, and so I feel a little bit embarrassed that was my very first one. But
I think that the ranger elf chapter in D&D should open up with, "So you want to be Legolas?" and then just like, here's all the text.
Right.
I think like a lot of people like Lord of the Rings is their touchstone. I've had a lot of people that play. They're like, I want to be like Legolas, or like I want to be a dwarf, or I want to be like Strider, Aragorn. Like that's just like a really common.
Back in the early 2000s because the movies were out right then.
Right.
Yeah. Nowadays you can point to Game of Thrones and things that are different, but
yeah, that's true. It's fantasy's changed. We have more options now.
But, Ashley?
Yeah. So, if you were embarrassed about your first character, mine was there was a guy that I met online dating. This was about 10 years ago. And he played games, and I had never played RPGs at all. Like, I had never done anything like that. I was newly divorced. My ex-husband did not like anything nerdy. He made fun of me for even showing an interest in anything nerdy. Aww. So, yeah. That's why he's my ex-husband. So,
cut that out. You don't need that.
Yeah. And so this guy he's really into a bunch of like nerdy stuff. And I'm like, this has always interested me, and I've never been involved in it at all. And so it was like a White Wolf Super Friends homebrew kind of thing, because he just mashed everything together, but it was all like White Wolf stuff. So
there was a White Wolf superhero game, right, Alan?
Aberrant.
Yeah, that's the one.
It was not superheroes. We were definitely not superheroes. Yes. Yes.
I know that campaign. I ran that campaign.
Yeah. So we were running like around Battle of Thermopylae type. So because he was really into history too, and so he kind of mashed them all together. Like Xerxes was not human, stuff like that. So it was actually really interesting. It was a really fun campaign. Yeah, it was amazing. Now I was the girlfriend that came in to play with the friends that have been playing forever, and I had no idea what I was doing. So I was like, I want to play a kitsune named Violet, and she really likes purple, and her eyes are purple, and he was like, what about a backstory? And I was like, what's a backstory? And so he's like, okay, you have amnesia. So he was very nice, and his friends were very nice. I have no idea what they said about me after I left. Like, because when we broke up, I was dating the GM. When we broke up, I had to leave the game. So I don't know how he killed my character off, but I hope it was good. But like, I had amnesia, so I didn't have to do a backstory. And then it was interesting. It was an interesting first experience. So that was my first character that I ever played was Violet the Kitsune. So
if it helps you feel better, I killed my wife's character on Sunday in front of her. So
I know, because was that her first?
It was not her. What?
Was that her first character?
Oh no.
Oh, okay, good. I was going to say, I was
fine. 6 years.
I know. I've seen you kill Aaron in some of our games.
Well, because
I definitely don't play favorites.
Because this past week, 2 different Pathfinder campaigns I'm in, because I'm in a 1E and a 2E campaign, which the rules are really interesting to try and keep separate, by the way, because they're really close. So my characters like died but didn't die in both of them in 1 week. And so it was a very stressful week, but I had posted about it, and you said that about Aaron's character, I was like,
Oh,
Aaron.
In a dungeon on the first session of our new campaign. Dead.
Mhm.
Nope.
Wow.
Yeah.
What system?
5e. I totally murdered her halfling rogue.
Wow.
Oh. My husband told me that I should kill one of your characters on the first episode, and I was like, "No way! That's so mean. They put so much effort into these."
You know, like that's the company.
Yeah.
And you play with me, Madi. I don't just kill characters.
Right.
Mhm.
I wait till you do something stupid and you get what
Yeah.
you do.
But I've
Yeah,
definitely had
for
that
sure.
conversation where I've pulled players aside and said, like, how would you feel about having another, like, making another character? Because I'm probably going to kill yours. Like, but I don't tell all the players because I like to get, like, if I'm gonna try to kill a character, I want at least the player to like sign off on it.
Yeah.
The player death is something that I think like everyone at the table has to be like sign off and say, okay, I'm good with player death in this campaign.
Yeah.
There's lots of ways to get rid of a character without player death, you know.
I think it should happen way more often than it does, at least in my playing experience. I mean,
It makes it a lot more
It should.
interesting.
Yeah.
Depends on the
I
game,
was
though.
GM.
Mistakes. Even if
The
you're
GM
playing
for-
epic fantasy.
Yeah. The GM
Yeah.
for both of them is one of my roommates. And so I'm just like, did I take the last cookie and not tell you? Like, are you mad at me? Because you killed my character in both of the campaigns that we're playing together. So, yes.
That's hilarious.
You know, that speaks to a truth of GMing. You know, I having ran a couple games online. Most of the previous ones were streamed on Victory Condition Gaming, which folks should check out if you want a good service to watch. I definitely got a few character kills in, and I developed. People are like, "Alan's gonna kill a character," and I was like, "I don't feel like I killed that many characters in my actual game." You know, but you got to have stakes. There's a balance, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
As a
Agreed.
GM, sometimes you are weaning that balance in the moment.
Yep.
You can plan in advance, and I've definitely had, like Ryan does, those conversations where, hey, I'm going to do this to your character because I want to get a point across. Are you cool?
Mhm.
And 9 times out of 10, the person's like, oh, that sounds great. Yeah, let's do it. And then we have an idea that's even worse than mine. Like, you should do this instead. I'm like, oh, great. And then, you know, sometimes I have players like Madi husband Scott, who, by the way, is not invited to my Town Called Malice games anymore. The shenanigans with the tiki torch crap. Like, or tiki doll or whatever, the cursed tiki doll he kept like dragging around town.
It was a garden gnome or like
That's
a
what it was.
carved troll. It was a troll doll that someone had carved. That's what it was.
I was all prepped really serious a Town Called Malice game, and me and my wife just came in and were like, what if we Looney Tunes it?
Oh,
And I was like, wait, what? And then it was over, and
It's-
lost
Yeah.
control.
tone.
So Scott doesn't get to critique.
One of my friends tried to run a really like spooky 5e game. She was like, I want this to be really spooky. And anyone who knows me knows that I'm not serious ever. Like I'm reining it in so much for this because I want it to be spooky. So, and I tried to do that for her. And so I'd have something fun to say. And this is my cup that I always used to drink when I'm playing. And so when I had something to say, I would say it into the cup. Because I was just like, I have comments and I can't not let them out, but I would like have to say it into the cup. I had my cup of silence that just echoes, so it didn't do anything. Like,
Oh, that's
yeah.
too funny.
I have a really hard time playing horror in 5e.
Greg says, in all my years of GMing, I think I've only killed 3 characters.
Oh wow.
Wow.
Okay,
I
more
wish
than that.
I wish I was even close to that. It's got to be.
Yeah.
I mean, there was a Call of Cthulhu game. I think Madi was in it where I like TPK'd the whole party in one session.
Yeah,
'Cause
and
we did
that
something-
was the one because Aaron threw like the Necronomicon into the fireplace or something.
Yeah.
I was like, "Are you serious?"
You're like, why no?
It was a good. So we have some
Played-
questions. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Oh, I've played so many one shots over the years, like at
Right.
conventions.
Yeah.
And when I GM one shots, I'm like, every character could die. Like,
Yeah.
let's kill 3 or 4 characters at a time here.
I run a yearly Halloween game where
Oh yeah, so do I. Everyone
100%
dies.
Or death is 100% on the table. I would kill.
Mhm.
I once came with 40 backup characters, and we went through them all.
Wow. Okay,
Oh.
I've
Because I
never
was
been that
murdering
opportunity.
characters. So
Oh my god.
I definitely racked up more than 3.
Yeah.
So Molly, you have a question. Paul asks, Molly McGee does not shirk away from fighting, and as mentioned, the character has a strong sense of survival. So, did Mr. McGee meet with a quote cooking accident? The or was the lost moment guided by the character towards having the sense of survival? So, Frontier Life certainly would have been an influence.
I think that he died in a mining accident would be my guess, because we were in San Francisco, and I think that I mean he died in a mining accident, because it's my character's backstory, so I get to come up with that. Yeah, he died in a mining accident when we were in San Francisco, and so she needed to get away from the town and everything that happened, and that's why she went out to the Yukon. So she had nothing to do with his death.
So it was an accident, not an accident.
No,
Okay.
yeah, it was a real accident. So
We have a question for Madi and everyone else. Madi and everyone else, are there any other non-Roaring 20 settings you would like to explore someday with Tiny Cthulhu?
Oh, for sure.
So, real fast, in the Tiny Cthulhu book, Madi actually wrote a setting that deals with the
Russian Civil War.
The Russian Civil War, right? And
Nice.
it's what, 1910?
Somewhere around there.
It's a little pre-19 Roaring 20s, but it doesn't have any of the Roaring 20s elements because it's about a war. So, and when we were doing Tiny Cthulhu, and you know, I think when I sent my writers their guidelines, I said, don't do something in the Roaring 20s or the Great Depression. I was very clear, like, I don't want to make this game.
Yeah.
Right, and I said, do something different. And so I got a lot of great submissions. So we'll give the question to everybody. So we'll start with Ryan, and we'll go clockwise, ending with me. So,
100%. I want to do a Cyberpunk Cthulhu campaign. I think that would be awesome.
Okay.
Wow.
I love Cyberpunk, Alan. Don't judge me.
No. Okay. Send me a pitch. Like, let's do it.
Yeah.
My
sure.
co-host
right
on Full Metal RPG, Richie Buzzkill, he loves Cyberpunk. He's obsessed with Cyberpunk. He would very much be interested in that, I'm sure.
Yeah, I think it's a cool idea.
It is. Absolutely. I can totally see that. Madi, if you had to write a new setting for Tiny after the two you've done, non-Roaring 20s, what would it be?
I would probably set it during the Meiji Restoration in Japan.
Ooh, that would be really cool.
I love this kind of aspect of transitioning from kind of feudal Japan to modern Japan, like westernized Japan, and just like all of the cultural clashing that happens in there. Plus, I think Japan has just like some of the most cool ghost stories and monster myths ever. So I think that would be
they have some cool like folklore mythology stuff.
Yeah, that would be such a cool setting. We should talk about that.
I've been watching
let's do it.
I've been watching that Yasuki on Netflix, which is like
Yasuke,
Yasuke, thank you. Yeah, but it's like totally fantasied up, you know, with 100% like mechs and magic, and oh man, it's so good. It's so good.
I love it.
Yeah.
Ashley?
I have a few. I think, and I don't know how it would make it into a whole thing. This would probably work better as like a one-shot type situation, but I'm a scuba diver. I love diving, and there are just certain like a scuba diving Cthulhu would be really cool. Like you go in this new area and there's something that's so that'd be really cool.
Water.
You could even do like an undersea habitat, right? Like
Ooh.
Yeah.
Good idea.
That would be really cool. Yeah. So I think that would be fun. And another one I was thinking about the whole isolation thing, and I'm like, back in the day when they had ships where you had months-long journeys on ships to cross the oceans to get to places like Columbus, Pilgrim, that type of, you're on a ship and you were completely cut off from everybody, to have something like that where something was on the ship and you had these months-long journey and you could not get away from it. And that may have been done, I don't know, but that would be pretty interesting too.
That would be pretty cool. That sounds like an awesome one.
It does.
Gina?
You can't stop, you can't resupply.
Yeah.
I don't know. I think I guess a couple different things come to mind, but one is I don't know about you guys, but I really loved Lovecraft Country.
Yeah.
But separate from that, just that atomic age sort of pre kind of Cold War stuff, but there was still like a nuclear threat and that sort of thing. Just kind of, it's creepy. Like the 50s were like, I don't know, the ability to kind of highlight the WandaVision did a really great job of that too.
Yes.
That sort of era can look really artificial and like something else is going on behind it that's not really what it seems, the whole Stepford, and so that would appeal to me.
If you like that era, you should check out Jim Pinto from Post World Games, their new RPG Fairview.
Oh, cool.
It'll blow your mind.
Cool. I also love cyberpunk, so that sounded really interesting to me.
Yeah. So I have 3. The first one is obvious. I would do something with spies because I love spies. I love it. I love the Le Carre style tension of the non-action spy stuff. So I would do something like that. Superheroes versus Cthulhu would be really interesting because superheroes is a genre where winning is assumed, and Cthulhu is a genre where losing is assumed. And I love the juxtaposition.
Yeah,
I would do something with that. And then the ultimate one, my dream Cthulhu setting, would be Hannibal's march across the Pyrenees with all his elephants. What got all those elephants?
That's a great question. That's a movie script
something with a very big mouth.
Right.
I love ancient world history. I'm way into researching it, reading it. I have shelves of books.
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh man, like Hannibal's march across the Alps. And yeah, I'm here for that. First of all, I would make an RPG just about that. But then if you had Cthulhu stuff, I'd be like, let's talk about what got the elephants. What happened when the elephant goes mad?
What happened to the elephant, Alan? Alan, tell me what happened.
Has anyone ever done a Cthulhu in space?
We have a couple micro settings in Tiny Cthulhu that are sci-fi themed, actually. Yeah. One
cool.
from Melanie Meadors and one from, and I super apologize. I'm going to forget the name. Somebody else wrote one. There were 2.
Isn't Alien Cthulhu in space, basically?
Kind of. I mean, it's hard to argue as not, right? The first Alien movie is kind of the perfect cosmic horror movie.
Right.
Or like Event Horizon. I love Event Horizon.
Yeah,
that one's so good.
Yeah. Oh my god.
I'd play an Event Horizon RPG for sure.
Jack Norris wrote a sci-fi setting for.
Oh, nice.
But instead, you shrink yourself, and then you go in the bloodstream because Cthulhu is a bunch of pathogens. And so you like the weird 50s, you shrink yourself into like a submersible and go in the bloodstream.
Yeah.
Fantastic Voyage or whatever.
That's so cool.
It was the weirdest pitch I got when we were so. And I was like, there's no way we can't print this.
Yeah. Jack's been doing this a long time. He's got some crazy ideas.
Yeah. All right. Well, we're gonna take a quick 5-minute break. We'll be back at, for me, what is 9:35? So that's 6 minutes from now.
All right, 6 minutes.
And we'll see everybody in a minute.
Cool.
Bye.
Cool.
I appear to be the first one back. Look at that. Folks, if you have questions, post them in the comments. We're happy to answer them. We're just hanging out, chatting halfway through the Yukon Dark Tiny Cthulhu campaign, and we are here to answer your questions. You can ask anything you want about any of the cast members' creative pursuits or what they do, about the Yukon Dark campaign, about Tiny Cthulhu. Just give us your questions. We're here for that. So throw them at us. And Gina's back.
I am back.
I can't say things about Gina, but we can talk about everybody else.
You can totally. You can totally. I also love the spycraft stuff.
Spy stuff is the best.
Oh my god.
Of all the games Gallant Night Games have made, Cold Shadows remains my personal favorite because John le Carré is my favorite author. I have all of his books in duplicate. Like,
wow.
I read them yearly. And we made Cold Shadows, and I just absolutely love it. And
I'll write that down.
maybe we should play that on stream at some point.
Oh my god, I would love that. I backed a Kickstarter for Big Bad Con at a level to kind of support the con, but also because I got to play a game with Strash, Band of Blades, Scum and Felony, Strash, and he made a game with his partner John, and we got to. The whole game was decided by whatever word we threw out, and I was the first one to throw out a word, and it was spycraft.
Nice.
What was your
Cold Shadows?
Cold Shadows.
That was a fun one. I wrote for that one too.
That was our third campaign ever.
Was it really?
Yeah.
So what was the first Gallant Night Games campaign?
Tiny Frontiers.
See, I knew you before Tiny Frontiers came out.
No, that's the first project we ever worked on together.
Yeah, but I knew you before that, didn't I?
No, because Ben Warner introduced us, so you could write on it.
Maybe that is what it was. I thought I had already knew. Time doesn't mean anything anymore.
I'm pretty sure because I was pretty much not involved in the RPG industry, and then I ran a project.
Wow.
That's true. I remember Tiny Frontiers. That was a fun one.
Yeah, I remember working on your micro setting in a hotel.
Yeah.
Because you made me write a bunch of new rules with what you did.
Oh, probably. I feel like that makes sense. I liked my micro setting.
It was a great one. No, it was great.
Yeah.
All right. So, hey, everyone. We're back. This is the cast of Yukon Dark and the GM, Patty Murdoch. We're halfway through tonight, and we are doing a Q&A halfway through the campaign about really whatever you want to ask. It can be about Yukon Dark. It can be about any of the team's creative pursuits. It can be about, you can ask what our favorite food is or whatever. Like, I mean, feel free to ask a question, I guess. But we have a couple, so we're going to get started. I think somebody was making fun of my talking, and now I'm hurt. But I'm going to skip that comment, and we're just this one.
Jerk.
It's fine. I've had a little bit to drink tonight because
you're 100% fine.
So Paul asks for source material of Yukon Dark. Obviously, the mythos stories were important. Were other sources checked out? Curious if the writings of Pierre Burton, Canuck icon, were poured through.
I have never read Pierre Burton, so not that one specifically.
Adding that to my
yeah, that sounds really cool. I'll definitely have to check it out. But I would say, like I said, Jack London was a huge inspiration just from to start a fire. I think it was mostly just like online research that I did to prepare for this campaign. I've been to Alaska one time, and I really fell in love with the nature up there. And so I have a bunch of pictures that I was kind of like reviewing from my trip up there. But I don't think that there's too many other kind of like literary inspirations besides the Jack London story that I usually I got kind of into.
All right, and we have another question. And I apologize, I'm going to say this wrong, but Abiga Midra?
Abiomidra?
Abiomidra. Yeah.
I believe that's Irish Gaelic, and
Yes.
unfortunately, I only know Scots Gaelic, so my apologies.
I don't know any of
They're
it.
wildly not the same, I've learned. No, so actually during the pandemic, I was learning Scots Gaelic. That was my pandemic activity. So do you tend to play with the same group when you're playtesting, or do you try to play with new people that you're not all familiar with? So this is a really good question, and I'm going to fill this one at the start, and then folks can jump in. So for Gallant Games, we have 2 steps. First, we have general playtest groups that I just fire things at and say playtest this. But then I also do on my own controlled playtests. And one of the big components I do in this controlled playtest is I have somebody who's not me run the game off of my text. And then I am not there. I leave the room, or they're remote or whatever, and then they report back to me. Because I know what I'm trying to write, so in my head, everything makes sense. And the goal is to put it in front of people so they can tell me where the gaps are, and I can make sure it makes sense at the end. It's pronounced Abiomera. That's super simple, and I apologize. I should have got that. So that's kind of the general structure GKG uses. The mechanics, we kind of blast it to our teams. We have 4 to 6 playtest teams at any given point who are playing our games before they come out. And then I run controlled playtests of anything I'm concerned about. With the tiny games, I write so many of them that we generally don't need as many playtests anymore because I'm got pretty proficient at being the only rules developer in the game line. After 5 years, I tend to have a grasp on what I'm writing. But that's kind of what we do. So I know, Ryan, you've been involved in the development of games.
For sure. So back in the normal good old days, a lot of my RPGs were playtested at conventions, actually. Like, I'd look at what's coming out, and I'd playtest with, like, my friends. So my friend group was my friend group, and they've had to play every RPG I've ever done. So in that sense, yes, they've been subjected to all of my ideas. Some of them have panned out, some of them haven't. But then I'd look at, like, what is my target, and I'd see what convention. And I used to go myself, and I would just run, sessions back to back to back throughout all of a convention. I missed entire Gen Cons and entire Origins because I was running games on demand, or I was running in one of the rooms with the Indie Game Developer Network that whole weekend. Now, I'm lucky enough to be able to have people do that for me, so I don't have to miss the convention while people are playtesting. But I still think that is the best playtesting feedback I've ever gotten, is just from running it on games on demand, having GMs that aren't me run my game when I'm not even there, and then reading about it, hearing about it after the fact. Like, you learn so much about how, like, what parts of the game do people focus on when they're not your friends. Like, when people aren't, and they're not even there to play test, they're just there to play. Like, they know they're play testing, but they're just there to have fun. And so it's like, those are the people whose opinions I really, really want to know, because I want my games to be fun more than anything else,
That makes sense.
So I know, Madi, you worked on other games. Have you had a chance to work with playtesting and development?
Not usually. Usually the companies that I work for do all of that for me.
That's the best part.
Nice. So I just shoot them a draft, and then they say, okay, make these changes. And I'm like, sure thing.
Fair enough. Now, Katie, or Gina, sorry, your character name is first.
That's okay.
Gina, we've actually been in playtests together.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's how we met, was playtesting.
It is. Yeah, and I can't believe I haven't known you for years, because, like, we like so much of the same stuff, and yeah, and you're super cool.
Because I'm a delight.
You are a delight. It's
so
effing true.
So you've been on the playtesting side as a playtester.
Yeah.
So tell us about that.
I've definitely done a lot of playtesting. I really enjoy playtesting games. I think one of both the pros and cons is I can find fun in almost any situation. Like, I can play the roughest game, or with the roughest, person running it, like, not doing a great job or whatever, and I will find my fun. But I also feel like it's good to get critical feedback from all sorts of people. So I think sometimes I've seen when people are play testing, they're I don't know, you have to be willing to hear something that you're not necessarily ready to hear, because people come at games from all sorts of different ways. And I will just, the too long don't read is sometimes as a woman, playtesting games, your feedback is heard differently, or it seems to be heard differently. So it's interesting, but I love playtesting games. It's super cool.
Do you ever make it out to like the double exposure conventions like Metatopia or anything like that? Which are they're great cons for playtesting. I mean, you get there and you playtest all day long, the entire 3 days.
Yep.
That's super cool.
Now, Ashley, do you have any playtesting, either as a developer or as a playtester?
No, not at all. I would love to. So if there's ever anyone who
I'll
needs...
just add you to the list. All right, fine.
Right.
Cool, thanks.
A volunteer to playtest? Yes, we'll put that down.
All right. Yeah, playtesting is an interesting thing because, one, in the RPG industry, it tends to be unpaid, and that can be hard.
Or paid in product.
Or paid in product, right. I know I've done playtesting for major companies, and I've been only paid in product. I definitely don't feel like my time received adequate compensation. And other times I've been paid and I feel like it did, right? Or sometimes I'm never paid at all. And as a playtester, that's kind of your personal decision. A lot of companies will use playtesters who are playing those games primarily already, right? So a lot of my playtesters are people who play Tiny D6 regularly. And that's their primary game at the table. So asking them to slot it into their group games is something they're already going to do. And so it's less of an imposition. Whereas it can be hard to ask somebody to say, hey, I know you play XYZ regularly. Will you pivot and play my game? And so it's a balance. It's hard. It's definitely the hardest part of the design process that is external, in my opinion.
Yeah.
But yeah. And sometimes you end up playing a game where you play a sheriff in a Nordic noir town and probably 2/3 of the way through.
How do you know, Ellen? I almost called you Jameson, so there you go. How do you?
My name, so that's okay.
How do you know, approaching feedback for your games, what what feedback really resonates with you, and what
And what, I know this question, yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah, because I mean, certain things are not all games are made for all people. And that is, something that as a game designer, I guess you have to try to file in the back of your head. But how do you know when to go, okay, that's feedback, but that's, it's not really the game I'm making, so I'm okay with that feedback, versus, yeah, that's solid, I need to do some work.
It's practice, trial and error.
Sometimes it's really obvious.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, that's a...
Well, you'll not to jump in on Alan's answer, but you'll get people that are very, very obviously like, their feedback is all, this is not the game I wanted to play. I wanted to, and every piece of feedback is, this game is too light. I didn't roll the dice enough. There's not enough, and it's like, okay, I'm just going to ignore everything you had to say about this game because it's not your game, right? And then there are people that will complain about things like, you can look at what they played and you're like, okay, well, you're saying that the game feels unbalanced or the game has issues, but I see that you did these 3 things, which are just bad, terrible ideas. So, but then when you kind of cut all that stuff out, you'll start to get the people that are actually like, giving good mechanical advice or giving good, setting advice, I think, is where it comes into play. But everyone thinks that they can, be a better game writer than the person that wrote the game. I mean, you see this in everywhere you go. Every review, every RPG net forum, everyone's like, well, I would have done this differently. And it's like, you have to know the game you're making, to Alan's point. Like, it just comes with practice.
So there's 2 things about this industry that I think people don't say. So I'm going to get on my soapbox for a minute, and I apologize.
I probably agree with you. I'm probably going to agree with everything you said.
We're here for fun, because it's going to get heavy. You can't release a product without a certain amount of ego. right?
Sure.
Yeah.
Me coming to you saying, buy my game involves amount of ego because I think my game is worth your money, right? I might seem like the most humble guy in the world on the internet, and generally speaking, I am. But I also do believe that my design work is worth your money. That's why I'm trying to sell you, right? And so when I get bad feedback, it hurts. It stings. I react to that because I do have an ego. And I think as a creative, you have to learn to acknowledge that this exists, but also that your ego is not the sole arbitrator of what is good and bad, right? There's this balance you're trying to strike. And some days are easier than others, and some products are easier than others. And as a creative, you have to learn that. And it's really hard. And it's something in the game industry we don't talk about a lot, which is the egotism of creativity. I could write a whole blog series about this because I have a lot of opinions about it.
I thank you for saying real stuff, because I think people are like me and other people are interested in that. So I appreciate it.
So, learning to separate what is personal frustration or pain versus valid is hard. And it's the kind of thing you can only do with practice. I've taken many emotional beatings from my playtest teams where I've had to walk away and be like, I'll have to deal with this tomorrow because I feel angry or frustrated or negative emotion, right? And the longer I do this, the more I get good at saying, okay, this is good, this is bad, this is good, this is bad, and just shuffling it off. But every time I get an email from Drive Thru RPG where somebody gave my game a 3-star rating, I start to wonder why, right? And that never goes away. You're never going to get rid of that. So the trick is learning how to deal with it and how to use that as a springboard, right? Number one rule on the internet is don't read the comments, and number one rule of game design is don't read the reviews.
Don't.
People you trust will pass you good reviews, and people you trust will give you good feedback. I have a team of designers and collaborators who I trust when I send them my alpha drafts to give me honest feedback, and I built that team over time, and that's what you have to do. Because at the end, creative expression can be damaged, just like it can be built up, and you have to learn when to inflict injuries and when to give it time to heal. Mm-hmm. So there's your rough.
Well, cool. Reviewing games is hard. Reviewing games is not like I review board games. That's what I do for my day job. And a board game has a set of rules. It's played out over a set amount of time. And like there's only X number of things that can happen. And it's still really hard to be really fair about that. But like when you're looking at a role-playing game that's almost completely player-controlled, and Gina, you said this earlier, and this is true, a good GM will make the worst system fun, and a really bad GM can ruin your experience of the best RPG ever made. So when somebody comes on a review and starts saying, well, I'm giving this 1 star because, and you read the review and you're like, well, you had a really bad GM, man. I'm sorry. Like, that's 100%. Rough and that's bad that you had a bad experience, but you can't don't go on there giving 1-star reviews because you had a bad experience, right? People don't take the time to critically think about, why was my game bad? Oh, it wasn't the game's fault. It was my fault as a player. It was the DM's fault as a DM. And but yet the first thing they always do is criticize the creator every single time. And it's so easy to jump online and start typing about. So you just have to know that when you were reading it, it's just that bad experience that they had was not your fault. You can't be there hand-holding every game, making sure that people are playing by the rules correctly or that they're having the experience, presented to them correctly. Like it's tough to get over that, but it's probably not your fault, Alan, is all I'm saying.
It's all right. Oh, I'm sad. There we are.
Oh no. Sorry, too real.
We're going to pivot to a different question.
Yeah.
So Paul asks, there are a variety of names for this mechanic. I will refer to it as the X card. Especially in genres such as the mythos and Nordic noir, it is a very welcome mechanic /tool / I apologize, and that I might be using the wrong term. Are there other genres that you think it can appear in, or do you think it should be a regular mechanic /tool /word? So what Paul is referring to is what are colloquially called safety tools in role-playing games. And they are tools designed to protect the players from situations that might be emotionally difficult, hard, or traumatizing. The most common and well-known is the X card. And in this game, before we played, we established that we did have an X card, and it was simply raising your hands and doing an X. And that was our online X card. Because the mythos can be dark and hard, we also discussed what might be a problem for people in advance and gave everybody a chance to submit their concerns to the GM so she could avoid it. That's where the no animals can be harmed rule came from. That was mine. I was very clear that I won't deal with dogs being harmed.
Moose are okay though.
Yeah, well,
Yeah. Yeah. We specifically decided if it was something that you could hunt, it's okay.
Right, that was fine.
Yeah, right. Would it be a pet? Well, maybe don't do that.
Right.
So, and they're definitely most common in Mythos and Nordic Noir and hard games like that. And so I think the thrust of Paul's question is, when is it appropriate and when is it not? That's what I'm getting, right? Is it a genre thing? Is it a group thing? Is it
I think it's an everything, man. Like every game I run, especially at a convention, will have an X card on the table. I'm part of that, like I said, for a long time, part of the Indie Game Developer Network, and we have a room at Gen Con that you can go in and you can play a ton of indie RPGs, and every table on there has an X card and safety sheets. We encourage GMs to bring in their own safety tools, but at the bare minimum, every table has to have that. And like, I don't care what genre you're playing, if it's a Western game, if it's sci-fi, like the industry has proven time again that people will put other people in very uncomfortable situations. And it's fun. We've seen this in live streaming. We've seen it. It's happened at conventions. People have been removed. So I don't care what genre it is. Like, these things are happening. And so just having even the barest minimum safety tools at a table, I think, can go a long way to making people comfortable. Like, I wouldn't want to play at a convention if there were not safety tools in place, regardless of if it was horror. Any role-playing game. I mean, I don't care if it's a comedy. It can get into some really weird stuff.
Not even. I'm sorry. Were you going to say something else?
No, go ahead.
I was going to say I totally 100% agree with you, Ryan. I don't think it's genre specific or scenario specific or time and place specific, because I just think anybody can have a trigger, and I don't even mean like PTSD, PTSS trigger. I just mean sometimes somebody could have a really bad day or have something happen in their personal life, and then there is just something that happens in game that is jarring. So it's good to know that, and it's good to have some sort of way to, I don't know, kind of casually, I guess, or be able to communicate, hey, can we not go there? Whatever your table sets up.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the X card I think is important to have at every table. Every table I play at has it or run at. But I also really like the lines and veils, which is something you can do ahead of time as well. And so for anyone unfamiliar with lines and veils, it's what lines do you have that this cannot be in the game at all, like not alluded to, not anything. And then veils is something that it's okay if it happens like off screen. So if you can, that pre-campaign or pre-game meeting that you all have together, I think is so important, because you can set things like that up. You can set up, what is your X card going to look like? Because some people don't want to have to reach across the table and tap an X, because that kind of outs you as having a problem with that, So it's just a really good thing to have that meeting. We have whole episodes on this with Full Metal RPG where I have a lot of thoughts about it. I think it's really important.
Full Metal RPG is a great podcast, and you should go listen to it. I've actually been on there twice. So.
Oh, really? I've never been on there even one time.
Those episodes. Really good episodes.
Just look up the ones with Alan.
Look up the ones without Alan. You'll have a better time. So, Madi, as a GM, both on this live stream, how has that impacted your thinking versus something in person?
Personally, when we first were kind of just like getting the initial foundations of this campaign set up, I was really glad that Alan made that a really important part of our kind of session 0, where we made characters and stuff, mainly because when you're dealing with something like cosmic horror, like horror means something so specific to like every single person. So like something that's horrifying to me is not going to be necessarily horrifying to someone else, or something that is not horrifying to me might be really, scary for someone else. And so I really wanted to make sure that we were all on the same page specifically for this kind of campaign. So for example, it was really good to know, right, like that harming dogs was off the table. Like that could have made a really bad situation in our gameplay, even though we're friends, right? Like, even though we kind of know each other, we had practice sessions. Like, if we didn't have that rule on the table, like, it could have gotten really bad. As far as just like in general, though, what I really like about safety tools is that it's a really good bridge between experienced role players that maybe like work really well together as a team or have been playing for a really long time, and like noobs. So people who have like maybe never played role-playing games before or don't know how they work, or they're playing with strangers for the first time. I think that safety tools really just kind of help get everyone on the same page and allow for easy communication of difficult concepts without having like a conflict arise. And so I think personally I would always have safety tools, and it talks about like lines and veils or something like that if you're going to play with strangers or people that you've never played with before, because I think that will just make this just everything go a lot smoother when you're trying to like learn about each other and figure out what each other's comfortable with.
Sure.
So X cards also another thing about X cards that I think will help normalize it a little bit more, because people are nervous to use it sometimes, is the fact that like use it more. If there's something, we were talking about tone earlier, if you're trying to run, it's for the GM too. If you're trying to run something that's a little darker and someone's just being too goofy, X card it, move on to the next thing. So it's like, it doesn't have to just be for things that make you feel unsafe. It can be, this is not the tone I want. I'm not having fun. Anything that's making you not have fun with it, you can do that.
And so I'm gonna be the controversial opinion here, I guess, and I apologize. First, let me say unequivocally, safety tools are wildly important, and you should never disregard them. That being said, there are situations where they can be equally harmful to the game. You can be so comfortable with the group that you know what's safe. For example, my wife. I know with my wife pretty thoroughly what is off limits and what is on, okay in a game. And I've had groups that I played with for 15 years where we are at that similar level of comfort. And even if something uncomfortable comes up, we're good having that conversation without needing clearly delineated safety tools, because we've built that rapport over time, right? Safety tools are a tool that, this is my opinion, they are a tool that is used until you are comfortable discarding them. And there is a point where each group can reach that point, and that's for your group to decide when that point happens. And you should never do it early. You should always make sure everybody in the group, 100%, is comfortable with leaving a safety tool behind before you do it. And I don't think they're ever negotiable with people you never played with. I don't think you can do a convention game or a one-off or anything like that without them.
Yeah. I mean, I agree with a bit of that. I just think I have never played with a group long enough to reach that level of comfort where I can, like, if you play with the same group of people over, like, what their comfort level is, know what's off the table. That has never been my experience, because I'm lucky to get a campaign that lasts 6 months, and then it's a new group of people. You know what I mean? Yeah,
I get that. And I've been lucky. I've had campaigns to go for 3 to 5 years, or some that went 10 years.
Yeah, I'd love that.
Right?
Maybe one day.
So we were very comfortable. We knew what everybody was kosher with, right?
And
I have one that's
discussion.
Been a couple years now. My longest running campaign right now has been a couple years, and we know each other well enough that if someone says something that is out of line, or we can just nope. Like, we're comfortable enough with each other that we can just bring it up. We don't need something like the X card. We can still,
And I think a lot of the conversation around safety tools gets bogged down in absolutes when really they're a graduated mechanic.
Yeah.
Right? That they're designed for you to be able to move past them one day. But when that occurs, that's up to you and your group, and it needs to be an honest, open conversation.
Yes.
Yeah. I think of them more in terms of like conventions and one shots and running games at your local game store. Like, what happens with your private group at home? I don't super use. We lost Gina. I don't use a lot of safety tools when I'm playing with my close friends at home. Like, when we, because everyone feels comfortable enough to be like, whoa, hey, like, we've all known each other for 10 years, even though we don't play in the same games all the time. Like, we all know each other 10 years or longer. But like, when it's strangers I haven't met, I don't know that they're going to feel comfortable saying this makes me uncomfortable. But like, my best friend, I know he'll be like, dude, like, knock it off. Like, let's not go there. But it's just knowing your group and knowing the people.
Yeah. So, I think it's definitely a piece of knowing your group. I think it's a piece of understanding the genre. Certain things are more likely to come up in a particular genre than they are in others. And I think it's just kind of it definitely smarter to be over safe at the beginning, right? And walk it back as you're ready to go.
Yeah.
There's a reason when we started this, I opened our session 0 with a conversation about safety tools. That's because, I know everybody here personally. A lot of these never run for anybody here but me. Have you even run for me before this?
I don't think so. I think this is the first time I've run for you. Yeah.
And like, we never all played together as a group, and so those conversations had to happen before we could play authentically.
Yay, Gina's here.
Gina's back. Sorry, I'll do the woo.
I know.
So safety tools are definitely something you should always start with, but in my opinion, they are designed to be graduated past at a certain point. And what that point is up to you and your group.
I don't disagree with you when you were saying that when I got throttled is what I think is going on here. But I don't disagree because I think at some point if your comfort level is really there with the group, you have the big boy pants conversations if something comes up. But then that means that's the new safety tool kind of is that there's a comfort level in just kind of saying, hey, whoa, can we rewind 30 seconds or something?
Yeah.
So I don't disagree at all.
Sure.
I think our consensus and summation has been safety tools are essential, especially at the start, but there is a point where you can graduate past them.
Yeah.
But I definitely would not run a Cthulhu game without them.
Yeah.
Uh,
I was going to say, Ryan, I think you mentioned this, but there are games like for the Queen that have like kind of a built-in sort of different use. It's the traditional use of the X card, but there's also an in-game use for the X card. And I do think that helps establish that comfort level because I think whoever said it 100% right, where sometimes the safety tool is out there, whether it's X card or fast forward or whatever you're using. But people are shy about using it because they don't want to be that person or something. So it is cool to normalize it.
Oh. Yeah, I definitely support, in our GKG games, depending on the game's topic, we've talked about safety tools. In Cthulhu, we have a conversation about it, and Cold Shadows has that. Some games don't, based on the topic. But, if you read my game design, you'll always see I'm overly stating the importance of communication. Talk to people at your table. Know what everybody's about, right? Having an X card in the middle of the table, not supplant having an upfront conversation at the start of the game.
Yeah.
It's not the same thing, right?
Yeah.
The X card is the
100%.
last effort, right? That's the last stop. The X card is though, hey, we're getting close. Like this is my abort button, right?
Yeah.
Be honest, have a conversation, keep the lines of communication open, give everybody both personal, private, and public lines of communication to you. So if they don't want to talk about it at the table, they can reach out after game or before game or whatever. Never stifle communication in a role-playing game because it kills games.
I have a question related to that, unless you have another question in front of you, Alan.
I don't think we have any current pending questions.
Okay. For Madi, and then maybe whoever, like Alan, you run a lot of online games. How easy or difficult do you find it to, because one thing that's important and related to what we're talking about is being able to read the table, both to run a game that's compelling and engaging everybody at the table, but also to understand if there's awkwardness happening or that sort of thing. So what do you think are maybe the strengths of doing, over the last year, I think a lot of us have played exclusively online games where we maybe used to be able to meet in person. So tips or...
One thing that I have kind of used in virtual gaming that I think is just super awesome about doing remote gaming is that if someone feels uncomfortable, there are usually online tools for that person to just like ping me as a GM and just say like, hey, this is going somewhere I don't want to go. And it's just a lot easier for them to use like some type of private chat or, you know, some type of just like back channel or a whisper in like Roll20 where you can like whisper directly to the GM. And so I think it does make, or at least it gives opportunities for people who might otherwise be like, you know, like worried about saying anything or stopping gameplay or something like that. And I think that's something that you could definitely do like at an actual table with other people if they just want to like text the GM real quick or something, you know. And so, but I do think that remote gaming does offer opportunities for that to happen more easily.
I also mean just like table engagement. So not even just talking about safety tools, but like when you run a game, I'm sure there are sort of social cues or things you look for as you're kind of honestly like playing to your audience. And it would seem to me that it's a little more challenging in a stream game versus yeah. Do you find that to be true or not? Or
I think that is true for sure. The main cue that I look for is silence, right? If we have a player that is not engaging for whatever reason, either they are not talking or they are refusing to like make their character go do the thing that everyone else wants to do or something like that, where they just kind of stop engagement, that's usually where I pay attention. I also am really careful about people kind of controlling the table, people that aren't me, right? If they like hog the limelight or if they want to go do a thing all by themselves, you know, I'm very careful about that and make sure that people that are a little more introverted or more quiet also get the chance to like play. And so I'm already just kind of naturally aware of that.
Wow.
But definitely that's something that I look for. I think Ryan does a good job. I don't think he runs off the rails.
I also think I have no idea. Rate my performance.
I can tell that's a total bromance thing. There's I don't even worry that there's like actual bullying or anything.
Adore Ryan.
I know you do.
I'm in Indianapolis. I hit him up so we can go get adult dirt cups from a restaurant.
That's true. It has not happened for a long time that you've been in Indianapolis.
In my defense, you know, the last year and a half.
I know.
It doesn't count. Yeah.
We actually have a question for Madi from the chat. It's from Daryl. He says, question for Madi. Where did you learn your descriptive style? A lot of your language really sticks, like Clive Barker or Stephen King level horror.
Oh, well, Daryl, that's really nice. I actually am a creative writer, so I have been writing creatively ever since I was in grade school. That was my initial like passion where I like went to my mom and was like, I'm gonna be a writer when I grow up. My mom was like, oh, you want to do grant writing? That makes a lot of money. And I was like, no, I don't want to do that. And so yeah, I really have been attacking writing with the intention of eventually doing it professionally. And so in college, I was a creative writing minor. I served on a bunch of literary magazines as editor and as I don't know. I've just done a lot of it. So I'm glad that it's bleeding into this because that's really cool. But definitely that's my background. That's my kind of professional background that I went to school for. So definitely I'm glad that someone's picking up on it.
Daryl and I have actually talked quite a bit about the campaign. He loves it and just how immersive it is and the language you use. And so he's like, I want to ask Madi and I just don't know how to be like, so dear Madi, WTF? Like, I don't know how to ask that, so I'm glad he found an eloquent way to put that.
That was awesome.
Sure. Well, thank you. I'm flattered that you think that I'm doing a good job. So thank you.
I'm going to jump in and give you, Daryl, a quick GM tip. Steal shamelessly from other writers who describe things the way you like. There is no shame in hearing a turn of phrase and going, that sounds really good. I'm going to yank that and use it in the game. So do it. Still like an artist.
Yeah, for sure. And like I said, like obviously like this campaign has a lot of like literary inspiration as far as, you know, like Cthulhu from Lovecraft and also obviously like Jack London that we've talked about countless times. Like I definitely take literary inspiration from authors that I love. And so that's where I get not necessarily like the specific ideas, but like the themes, the symbols, you know, some of the language for sure.
Right. We got a question from Greg. He says, Greg says, what are you all using for your online game? Greg, we're playing via StreamYard, which is a streaming service that Gallant and Game pays for us to play on.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of designed to be a streaming platform. It is only a paid service. And we are rolling in person and trusting each other like the adults we are. So I'm pretty sure Ashley's fudging it.
I have my dice out.
I'm keeping an eye
Like
on
shifty eyes.
Yeah. Ryan's pretty good about showing us his rolls, but
Well,
again,
After he
I
rolls
like
3
that.
times to make sure he gets the right one, then yeah,
I'm
he
telling
shows
you,
us.
you
He's
should
like,
see that.
"Ooh, yeah.
I hate that thing because I'm like, okay, because I have to, because it doesn't like you swipe to select how many dice you are using. So if I would just use 2 dice, I have to swipe to 3, and I'm like swipe, 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 and it just like will not do it for some reason.
But I think that's the kind of the beauty of like the tiny D6 system is that it's so simple. Like you need minimal tools to play this remotely. Like
A
it is
tiny
just
amount of tools.
so easy to play.
Yeah.
Tiny.
Yeah,
It is tiny but mighty, though.
Oh,
Like
that should be your slogan.
that is good.
Tiny
That
but
is
mighty.
good.
no, it does what it needs to in a very elegant way for something that is minimalist. I kudos because it's the first tiny game I've played. So
And that's why we ended up for Memory Alpha. That's why we ended up with Tiny Frontiers. Is we started with a D20 game. It was just too clunky for what we wanted to do because it's an actual play podcast. Like you want to be able to have narrative, and it's not just the crunchy crunch. So then we went to Fate Accelerated, which was like it worked, but it was kind of like But then when we found Tiny Frontiers, it was perfect because we have the dice, we have our rolls that we can use, but it's still very narrative, and I absolutely love that about the Tiny D6 system.
I do love Fate though, but I think Tiny D6 is great.
I think Fate would be, I don't know. I feel like Fate would be tricky to play on a stream, but that's a different topic.
So.
I mean, just because, well, I mean, you'd roll the dice a lot more in Fate, and being able to look at everybody's play area and seeing how many Fate chips they have left and seeing what their rolls are currently, like that's a huge part of being able to like take in all that information. So you need a way to present it on screen easily. That's kind of tough. We don't even need to show our character sheets for this. Like it's super easy to play online.
Yeah. Well, and I have several different games that I'm playing, and most of them are online. And we use the other games I'm in. We use Roll20 a lot. We use Discord. We use Skype or what's that other one that everyone started using during the apocalypse? Zoom. Yeah, we've used that. So yeah, there's a lot of different things out there you can use for online gaming.
Yeah, I would say most of the ones I'm playing are Zoom, almost exclusively, except this game is StreamYard. And then I have, oh my God, I have never seen that puppo before. And it's the cutest.
Who
is that?
She's a rescue, and she's a giant daddy's girl. So the fact that she's been locked out of my office for the last hour has been ungodly traumatic for her. Yeah.
I'm trying to get my dog so I can show you guys her.
My dog is an old man.
Staring in the doorway looking
He
at
goes to
me.
bed at like 8 o'clock.
When I work during the day, she lays in my chair behind me. And so I don't ever get to use my really nice, comfortable working chair.
Oh, no. What did you say her name was again?
Ella.
Oh, Ella. Cool.
Here's mine. She's a little mini wiener dog. Very sweet.
What's her name?
Her name is Danica.
Danica.
Yeah.
I would die for her.
Yes, as would I.
Yeah, those puppers are
Yeah, she barked earlier, so you guys got to hear her in the stream.
We should just do like a puppies episode, I guess, now.
Yes, and just be like, "This is my dog. Look at my dog. She's
I
very
wish I
cute."
had one.
Our other dog is an Italian Greyhound Chihuahua mix.
Oh.
So all long legs and derpy.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
We have a question.
Is it about my dog?
Not about dogs, luckily. Kevin asks, beyond the tiny Cthulhu setting, what are some of your other favorite tiny settings to play with? So we'll start with Ryan, and we'll just go around clockwise.
I mean, outside of playtesting my own scenarios for Alan, I haven't really played a ton of tiny games. So I want to play.
Alan is offended.
I want to play tiny mechs. I know that there's maybe some more tiny mech stuff coming out someday.
A new edition of Tiny Mechas and Monsters is coming out.
Yes, so I will probably run that when it comes out.
I really love Tiny Dungeons. I play a campaign with my family with that one because they aren't as nerdy as I am, I guess, is how the best way to say this. And so they really don't know how to play or hardly anything, but they love fantasy movies. And so I'm like, well, Tiny Dungeons it is. And they find it fascinating. They absolutely love it. So
You have
that's
no
one
idea how happy that's
great.
Oh, good.
It's good for that kind of thing.
Obviously, I love Tiny Frontiers because I don't ever shut up about it. Anytime anyone's like, what system would you recommend for this? I'm like, whatever tiny anything will fit into that, do that, because I love it so much. We started to kind of do a Tiny Supers with the crew of Full Metal RPG. We started to run like a superheroes thing that we were going to try different systems in the same world. And mine was Tiny Supers. And then the wheels fell off and exploded. So we stopped, but it was fun. So I really like that. And those are the two that I've mainly played, are Tiny Frontiers and Tiny Supers, and then now Tiny Cthulhu.
I love Tiny Supers. I have a deep passion for superhero stories and superhero genre, whatever. It's my favorite genre. There's a reason Tiny Supers gets all the supplemental material.
Mm-hmm.
I'm asked to write stuff, and it's because it's what I want to write. So if I could run Tiny Supers all day long, I would run Tiny Supers in the Gallant verse, the home setting. So that's my jam.
Mm-hmm.
I'm really looking forward to playing that. This is my first tiny D6 game, and I'm loving it. And everything I'm saying about how much I love it and why I love it is legit. Like, I'm not just saying that. I really think it's a good system, and it made me want to go explore other systems, even if we weren't going to play another one. Tiny Supers would definitely have been probably the next one that I would have wanted to check out.
So there is Tiny
Supers looks great.
Tiny what?
What again, Alan?
Gunslingers, which is a Western.
I saw that.
And
Tiny
it uses,
For real.
It uses blackjack for doing gun duels.
Nice.
That's
That is
awesome.
cool.
Nice.
My second favorite is
Oh,
so I dearly love Beach Patrol
Yes.
because nobody told me I could make an RPG about lifeguards, and then I said ha, and I did.
And if you mix Beach Patrol with Mecha and Monsters, you can do like Baywatch versus Kaiju.
Isn't that Pacific Rim?
Anything goes.
Yeah, kind of.
Mix it in.
Cold
And there's all-
Cold Shadow.
Oh, go ahead.
Oh, no. You were finished what you were saying.
Oh, I was gonna say, and there's all the great licensee stuff like Stranger Stuff or Thunderscape from Sean Carmen's Coyote Press.
Mm-hmm.
There's loads of Tiny D6 material out there that's not just from Gallant Night Games. So check it out.
Nice. Nice. Is it Cold Shadows is not a Tiny D6 game, is it?
It's its own thing.
I need to check that out too, though.
Yeah.
Yeah.
For sure.
Mm. I might have hinted that was a stretch goal during the Tiny Cthulhu Kickstarter campaign, and we didn't unlock it because of the pandemic. I might have to write that.
Yeah, you probably will.
Idea.
I do need to write a game tomorrow, so I guess I'll do that.
You have to write a game tomorrow.
Yeah, Al has to write a game every day. It's the promise he made with the devil to get all these games written. That was
What is that?
So, I don't know how you want this said. I apologize. Is it Jaredaf? Jaredaf must be a Patreon member of our Patreon, which is at patreon.com/Gallant Games. By the way, give us your money on a reoccurring basis so I can eat. And Jaredaf, perfect. Tiny Gothic Horror is a urban horror Tiny D6 genre book where you play things like vampires and werewolves and mummies and mages and Frankenstein-style monsters. It's definitely not the World of Darkness, but Tiny D6. It's legally distinct and separate, so I can't be sued.
Yes.
Tiny, definitely not the World of Darkness. I got it.
Yes. That's
Yeah.
what the D stands for, is Tiny D6. Is tiny, definitely not the World of Darkness 6.
Tiny World of D6.
But it is a modern gothic horror setting. It's actually, I wrote it in 2017, and it's been sitting there because I haven't been able to get it to the publishing table. We do two types of tiny books. We do what I call big books, which are the big genre splat books, like Tiny Cthulhu, Tiny Dungeon, Tiny Wastelands, right? They're big, overarching kind of genre style books designed to accommodate a lot of story time. And then we do what I like to call smaller micro books, like Tiny Gunslingers. Like Westerns are kind of just a really narrow niche, right? Tiny Living Dead, which is zombies, really narrow niche. So they don't need a big Kickstarter campaign and a fancy book to back them. And so, but Tiny Gothic Horrors is the working title for the big fancy urban horror book. So
That's awesome.
That's awesome, yes.
Yeah, that does sound awesome.
Yes.
inspired by my long love affair of World of Darkness stuff, plus a lot of other stuff.
Nice.
So,
Very cool.
yeah.
Did you play lots of World of Darkness stuff in the aughts or the?
If you're assuming I ever stopped, you are sore.
Okay.
Marty got roped into one recently. It was like 2 years ago now at this point. But,
Yeah.
It
was fun.
Yeah, we played Vampire Dark Ages. So
Oh, awesome! I played a little short campaign of that. What's that one?
yeah,
Carcosa County Line.
that is an upcoming Tiny Cthulhu / the Fetter system, which is a new card-based role-playing game system I wrote. It's a Southern Gothic cosmic horror
Oh, cool.
called Carcosa. Yeah, I figured Gina would be like, oh hey.
I know. Jesus,
That's fun.
that's some good stuff.
Patreons will be getting that that's the next Patreon reward. So if you are a Patreon, be a $10 Patreon by the start of June, and you will get a copy of Carcosa County Line. Oh, Greg has a question. Oh man, all these Tiny D6 questions. Martial arts product I saw mentioned be Mortal Kombat or able to do Bloodsport, Kickboxer, The Quest, Never Back Down, etc. So actually, ironically enough, about 1.5 years ago, we released something called Fatal Fists, which was it even used pixel art. It was definitely a non-subtle ripoff of 90s era fighting games. And I went out to Patreons and we never released it publicly after that. And then I watched the Mortal Kombat movie that came out recently, and now I have all these ideas and I want to begin from the ground up. New Tiny D6 fighting game. So we'll see, Greg, how much time I have to do crazy stuff.
I know, and I heard you mention earlier a Monsters and Max one, so that's totally...
So our second Kickstarter campaign, Ryan worked on this one, was Mechas and Monsters, where you can be mechas or you can play kaiju.
Ooh.
What?
One of
That's cool.
the best playtest sessions I ever ran was, that got weird. Was I sat the players down and they made their kaiju, and then I told them, okay, humans stole your eggs. Also, you can't talk to each other, so you have to roar at each other.
Oh,
And it was awesome.
Yes, that would be amazing.
So we have a new edition of that coming out
that
this
would
year.
be super.
Cool.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. So there's that.
Do you do a newsletter, Gallant Night Games?
I should. Yeah, I should. The best thing to do is be a Patreon member.
Okay. No, that's fair.
If you want to find out what's going on and get advanced stuff, be a Patreon member.
Cool.
Yeah. So we're running to the end of the clock here. We'll give everybody a chance for any questions. Ryan, do you have any more questions for anybody here?
I mean, not that would be answered in 2 minutes, but No, I mean not really. I think we covered a lot of great ground tonight.
Okay, Madi, do you have any more questions?
Not some that can be answered real fast, I guess.
They don't have to get through real fast. Just if you have a question.
Okay. Well, I was curious because obviously, like, this is actually my first time that I'm actually playing with Ryan and Ashley and Gina. And so I know that Ashley kept saying, like, "Oh, I'm nothing like Molly is," right? And so I was curious, like, I guess Alan could answer this question too, but like, do you guys often, when you're role playing, like, do you make characters that are kind of like you, or do you make characters that are like totally different from like who you are in real life? And
So
like, why or why not?
I always make character. I think Alan said this earlier and hit the nail on the head. I always start off with these characters that are very different from me, but then as I'm playing them and as I'm forced to make decisions, I'm like, oh, I don't want to do that. Like I don't want to do that terrible thing or be that terrible person, even though like my character should be. Like I'm playing in another game, a 5e game where I'm playing like a grizzled gunslinger from the like Wild West, basically, who hates everybody. But I'm like, oh no, I got to save all the people from this town, and I'm like, I can't not do that. Like as a player, it's really really hard for me to separate that. So maybe there's things about Bailey that are not like me at all, but that like heart of gold part that like he does care about people. Like I can't play a character that doesn't care about people. That's just really really hard for me to do.
I all of my characters are chaotic good. Like that's the best way to describe it because I am chaotic good. So I make my characters a lot like me in most of my campaigns, but there's one that I played in particular in the short-lived the Cup of Silence game that I was talking about earlier. It was the first time I played a bard, and it was a 5e campaign, and she was like this just really bitchy Southern belle type. And so she was so far from who I was, but she was very much like, she thought she was famous. And so everyone was just falling at her feet, even though no one knew who she was. She was like a circus performer that was really big in her little troupe. And so she was convinced that she was just amazing. And so she was very self-absorbed and stuck on herself and just really like she was doing everyone a favor by being there kind of thing. So that was a lot of fun for me because I have a theater background. And so it's like being able to play something like that that's a character that's totally different from who I am. It was a lot of fun to step into that. But most of the time, especially for long running campaigns, I just played me because you play what you know. So yeah.
I mean, I think on a timeline of eventually approaching 0, everybody ends up playing the same character one way or another.
Right? A lot of ways. Yeah.
Yeah.
Jameson is definitely, he's not out of archetype for me, but he's definitely not in my normal box. Normally I play kind of quippy paladin characters, and Jameson's he's definitely close to that, but he's a little bit outside the norm there. So, but yeah, Gina.
I think I lean away from who I am in real life, almost like 80%. And I also play chaotic good, leaning into chaotic neutral characters a lot because that's fun for me. But there are absolutely times I will still like lean against my own personal kind of type and play something, that's serious and that maybe leans towards exploring things that I, are more like in real life stuff. But I, like Ryan, I will realize that those are the things, like I don't come up with huge backstories, but I try to come up with things that I feel like will be intuitive for me to play as part of that character. So I'm not like feeling my way 100% the first 2 to 3 sessions. I'm like, they're kind of like this. Like, I think this is how they would react to this and that side, and maybe I know a little bit about where that comes from, but I don't know everything. But I also have a really hard time not playing loyalty. And so that ended up being my belief for this character, because even though I kind of wanted this character that wasn't completely predictable and that was, exploring, not necessarily really good at this new stuff, and that was sort of wide-eyed, I also knew there's no way I was going to play a nihilist or like I was going to be that, oh, for God's sakes, I've got your back kind of thing. Like, because I can't not do that in a game. Unfortunately, it just is. So you might as well lean in and recognize it.
Cool. We got 2 more quick questions here, then we'll get back to giving Ashley a chance to ask any last questions she has. First, Greg said, if you didn't see my question, is there a Tiny D6 mashup that would be Stephen King's Dark Tower? I mean, I would say Tiny Cthulhu plus Tiny Gunslinger, and you're there.
Yeah.
I think that covers you 100% of the way.
Just do what he did and just mix all the tinies together in one
Yeah,
system.
you can just throw them all together and be like, jump from world to world, done.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And then Abby O'Meara asked, had to leave for a bit, so I'm not sure if this was asked. Is it hard to switch off your GM brain when you are playing in someone else's game?
Sometimes.
Yeah,
That's a
sometimes.
Good question.
Because there's sometimes sometimes definitely when I'm trying to meta it, and I'm like, what is Mari wanting us to do from a GM point of view? And I'm trying to see, and I'm like, no, I need to stop. Play the character, do what the character would do what you want to do.
Yep.
And it's kind of hard to turn off.
It's never hard to turn off my GM brain, but it is hard to turn off my game designer brain, especially when playing a game I wrote. It is really hard to step back and not interject and be like, no, that's wrong.
You're really good about you have not done that at all.
It's because I have a really firm grip on just don't talk if you don't have to. And that goes a long way. It's also because Madi clearly understands the rules and didn't get anything wrong.
Yeah.
So I'm happy. But it's definitely difficult to not want to interject, I would say. Ashley, did you have any last questions for everybody?
What's your favorite food? Since you even said that as a question at the beginning and no one asked it. What's everyone's favorite food?
Ryan.
Asian food, man. All sorts of Asian food. Anywhere from Asia. Just, that's the best.
Madi.
I love just Japanese style white rice. I think it is the perfect food. Even just by itself when it's well made is just divine. I love it.
Yeah, I couldn't just pick one thing. That's why I had to go all Asian food.
Yeah.
Ashley.
Mexican food. I love Mexican food.
Gina.
Food.
Yeah.
Nice.
Cheese.
Cheese.
Yes.
Cheese
Cheese is a good move. It's a power move. I can't argue. My favorite absolute food is pho. I love. I would die for pho.
I'm really bummed because most of them, because I don't eat beef, and so a lot of them the broth is made with beef, so I haven't been able to have it.
Bummed.
Well, and now I'm wildly in love with steamed pork buns because I made them for the first time 2 weeks ago.
Yeah,
and they came out so good that I'm now completely crazy for steamed pork buns.
Yeah.
So, but yeah.
Them.
So,
cool.
All right. Gina, do you have any follow-up questions, last questions?
You have been very gracious in letting me ask a million already, so I'm good.
Okay. I asked a majority of the questions, I think, so I'm going to not ask any more. Folks, this has been Yukon Dark. This is the excellent cast. Folks, where can people find you if they want to find you? We'll start with Ryan, and we'll go around.
You can find me on YouTube at Man vs. Meeple, and on Twitter at Loremaster Ryan, although I don't use it nearly as much as I should.
You can find me on my website, MadiMurdoch.com, or on Twitter, just at Murdoch_Madi.
If you go to Linktree and then / Ashley J. Smith, I have all of my stuff listed there.
You can find me on my Linktree, which is Linktree / Alan Barr. And then also GallantNetGames.com and all of the associated junk around that. It's out there. Just Google it.
Twitter at Gina Ricker, same thing on Facebook, and then Instagram at Gina Random.
Awesome. All right, folks. Thanks for asking questions. Thanks for hanging out. We'll be back not next week, but in an additional week for episode 7 of Yukon Dark.
So the 27th.
The 27th. There's no game on the 20th. We'll have a game on the 27th.
Okay.
Yeah.
See you then.
Yeah. We'll see you in 2 weeks. Oh boy.
Yes.
All right.
Bye.
So I meant to hit the short one, and I need to label them better. Apparently.
Oh, I was excited because I'm like, wait, it doesn't usually do
The
this
long
every
one.
week.
I know.
Yes.
I love it.
Cool.
The long one's fun.
It's
I
so
do too.
cool.
Oof.
It's exciting.
Yes.
Oh, I'm glad. That's
Do you
so
feel
good.
wrung out?
And we're still live, obviously.
Yeah.
It's after show. But
Yeah.
Q&A's always stress me the crap out.
Because you're like, what are people going to ask? Mhm.
Because I joke about being raised in a don't talk about your feelings stoic Midwesterner, but I'm also very much that because I was raised that way. And so 2 hours of tell me how you feel is always super not my thing.
Hmm.
It's not in my wheelhouse, but it's fine. I love it. It's always good.
Yeah.
I had
I
fun.
thought it was
Thank you
great.
for all
yeah.
the awesome questions. That was really cool.
It was fun.
Nice.
Yeah, definitely appreciate. Know lots of people watch post, but it was cool to have people live in there asking questions. So that was super cool.
A lot of great questions. It was great.
And it's good to learn more about all of you guys because, like, obviously, like we play every week, but like we don't get to actually just like chat for hours.
Yeah.
That's true.
Yeah.
Well,
Or show my dog off.
Yeah.
yeah, and a total nerd dream. Like, let me tell you about my character. So
Yeah.
it's like pretty cool.
I never told you about my first D&D character. I only told you about my first campaign. I just realized that.
No.
I made a first character who was a half-elf druid who used a dire flail, which is the flail with the flail that pulled in. I thought it was cool, so I spent a whole feat on it. Then I was like, this is dumb. What did I do? But my animal companion was a badger, so everything was okay.
Nice.
Oh, that's super cool.
Yeah. We also have to figure out what we're going to play after Tiny Cthulhu at some point.
Yeah.
Well, we'll figure that out.
Yeah.
Part of me says we should do a poll, but part of me says that we should never let the internet decide.
Because they choose Bodie McBoatface, which they should have kept. Like, I don't know why they
That's the best
decided
name
that wasn't a good idea. And I was like, first of all, that is an
Fantastic
amazing
idea.
name for a boat. So
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Bodie
You know, I'm
McBoatface.
always ready for some kind of supers role playing game.
Mm-hmm.
I can't let
I
all this
like
comic book knowledge
so
just
much
sit here
stuff.
being wasted, not streaming.
You said so many things tonight that sounded so fun because I love cyberpunk and I love espionage stuff and I love mechs and I love supers and I love historical stuff.
That's why I love superheroes, because you could literally tell every single one of those stories like
In a superhero setting.
in a superhero setting, which is why I love superhero spy stuff.
Yeah.
I mean, Winter Soldier is my favorite superhero movie, and that's literally just a spy movie. So
Your Patreon peeps could pick
that's
or
true.
something.
I could ask them, but I know who's my Patreons, and will I love them dearly? I don't know not
We'd be playing Bodie
because
McBoatface.
they, like me, would be like, what sounds the funniest? Let's pick that,
Yeah.
because that's what I would do.
Mhm.
But yeah.
But I was watching like a couple of the earlier episodes of Yukon Dark, and our show's pretty funny too. Like, it's gruesome, but like you guys are also really funny. So I think it's going to be fun no matter what we play.
Yeah.
True.
Mm-hmm.
That's one thing that someone pointed out. They're like, you guys didn't know each other before this. And I was like, some people kind of knew each other. And they're like, you have really good chemistry together. Like, we play well together.
Awesome.
So, yeah. I was like, that's cool.
Way to go, Alan, for assembling a good team.
Good job.
Well,
I was super precise about who I invited for a reason.
well,
These were not random invites.
Yes.
well, thank you. But also super smart with the play testing, so that we could kind of figure out, become a little bit more comfortable with the system and our characters and each other.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Or
My
practice
worry
sessions.
was if someone didn't work out, how was I going to disinvite them?
Oh,
Like,
Yes.
welcome to Play Betsy.
yeah.
You need to go.
Yeah. Sorry, you're being voted off the island.
Mhm. Yeah.
Luckily, that didn't happen because I made smart choices. So
Mm.
one of the few times in my life where I can defend
Well,
that.
that's nice. Now I'm all excited about what, like, maybe the Patreon could vote for a one shot, because then it's a one shot,
That's true. I mean, there's always
Mhm.
a palate cleanser between.
Yeah,
But yeah,
this and whatever we go to. I'm
Yeah.
just really excited for what comes next. Like,
Yeah.
and I mean next, like as in next episode,
Yeah.
not next after this. Like, I'm really excited for this campaign still.
Ryan, by the
Just
way, you
the
have a main
wings.
question.
Yeah.
I saw what cyberpunk influences my tiny Cthulhu plus tiny cyberpunk game be closer to and feel. Somebody actually did make a cyberpunk Cthulhu game, but I have a cyberpunk mythos game, but I haven't played it. But I really like Delta Green, which is like military Cthulhu, and I think doing something like
Okay.
that, but in a cyberpunk setting where it's like Delta Green cyberpunk would be very cool.
I can do that.
Mm.
Yeah.
Mm.
I'm with you, Ashley, on the cliffhanger though that Madi gave us. She has
I
given us
know.
some really good cliffhangers, and that one was the imagery was
She gave us some in the playtest.
yeah.
Yeah.
What?
Yeah.
What is happening?
Yeah. And my internet chose the worst, well, 2 times to drop out last session. I was like, get your together.
Yeah.
But at the end where it's just like, so there's this tree and there's this, and then everyone froze and I was like, no, what happened? So I like got on my phone really quick and I was like, what's in the tree? So like pulling up the Facebook Live so I could like watch it describe it still so I could still see it. But yeah, that was good.
Ryan, you're going to run
Yeah.
next, right? Because I don't want to follow Madi. I'm just.
I don't want to. I mean, I'm always down to run, but that is a tough act to follow.
Oh,
Yes.
thanks, guys.
I corrupted draw. Who just a short star have to GM after Madi? Here, I think.
It's a
True
tough act to
story.
follow. That's all.
Yeah. Hmm.
Oh,
But you will have her as a player,
That's
so you'll still get
that's
that.
true. I think
the
it'd be fun to get to
awesome
see
sauce in
different facets of everybody.
yeah.
Mhm.
You know, and I've GM'd a Cthulhu game for Madi before. The one where we had to quit like an hour in because one of the players was like, "Nope, I'm out. I'm done." Speaking of safety tools, walking away from the table and declaring you're done is a great safety tool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
We definitely understood what was happening, and everybody's like, "Okay, this is the end of the session tonight."
Mhm. Yeah.
No shame.
Yeah. Nope. Hmm.
When you're done, you're done. And
Yeah.
I think that's really important to do
That's
when you're
good.
playing with horror.
Yeah.
'Cause it can be really visceral for some
Yes.
Yeah, there's
Yeah.
some rough stuff. Oh,
Yeah.
yeah.
Sure.
All right, folks. Well,
That
we're
was
gonna-
fun though. Thank you for putting that together.
No, that was great. I think it's going to become a staple of our actual plays. I think I like the halfway point, like Q&A. I think it gives you enough to ask interesting questions, but you don't have to spoil the ending. Although I am disappointed, audience, that nobody tried to get us some advanced information. I
Right.
was really hoping somebody would come
Everyone
through.
wants to be surprised.
I did think of things that I was willing to spoil and things that I
Uh-oh.
definitely shouldn't. So
Whoa.
yes, I came prepared, but I'm glad I didn't have to say anything.
They missed out.
Nobody came to help us out, so I'm hurt.
Thanks.
Whatever.
Yes.
We're
Yeah.
leaving.
Sorry,
Good.
2 weeks. 2 weeks and we'll know.
All right, everybody. Have a good night.
I know.
Bye.
Yeah, bye.
Bye.